It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. One of the things I've been hearing more and more since the pandemic is as people are working from home, when I question them about their definition of productivity and are they being productive and are they adding value, I get some surprising answers. I hear people say, I'm incredibly busy. It feels like I'm always in a meeting or I'm always doing something, but I don't sense that I'm getting a lot done, which is really, really interesting. So I think that our definition of productivity may have become skewed as a result of COVID and as a result of working from home. So I thought it'd be good for us to review what exactly does productivity mean? Is our definition of productivity skewed? And how can we fight past that and get to a point where we have a good understanding of productivity that we feel comfortable with? I think that's the big key, right? So for starters, I, for one, am a big fan of to-do lists. I like to check things off. I like to have sticky notes. But sometimes I feel like I'm making great progress. Other days, not so much. When you're talking about big progress, like on life goals or making an impact in a greater world or just being happier in general, it turns out that checking the boxes doesn't always move the needle as much as a time management expert might say they want it to. So it's one of those things where sometimes you check the boxes and you get, favorable results or big results. Other times checking the boxes barely gives you a tick on that needle. So the question is, how do I get past I marked the task done, but what did I accomplish, right? So much of our workday is peppered with urgent requests via email, things that come to us through Team or Slack, interruptions, shoulder taps, same day meeting requests to add to our calendars. There's so many tasks, messages, meetings that are trying to drive us to our goals, or are they driving us away from our goals? The question becomes, what are we producing, and how are we actually measuring the work that we can accomplish? So there's a book. I'm trying to remember who the author was, but I want to say it was called Slow Productivity, and it proposes that we have become beholden to what they refer to as a treadmill of jittery busyness, and I love it. Because if you picture a treadmill, it's one of those treadmills that just keeps going and going. You can't step off, right? It's just going. So you struggle with productivity and time management, and you're trying to find a way out. And if you allow email to become the taskmaster for what you're doing, you're going to be in trouble because you're not going to have time to work on the things that really matter. So the question becomes, how do we take even some of the most harsh tools that we've gotten? During the pandemic, Zoom and instant messages tripled the busyness factor. There's always something going on, and there's Zoom fatigue, the unease of political and world events in our environment, and trying to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe, and making sure that we do what we can to balance working from home and giving them attention with the actual workday. Not to mention grocery shopping, doctor appointment, Costco run. I mean, I can go down a list with you, right? What's happening is something that I refer to as pseudo productivity is at an all-time high. You are context switching so much that something that would normally take you 30 minutes to do can be drug out to last 4 or 6 hours to do. And it's not because you're doing it intentionally. It's just you're always on green. You're always accepting those shoulder taps. You're always responding to email or trying to as soon as they come in, even though it's something that can wait. You're attending meetings without a clear agenda and not knowing what you should or shouldn't be doing. There's just so many things that you are doing where you're not contributing or adding value that's taking away from your real life productivity. So how do you break the habits? How do you kick this habit? How do you get to a point where you're driving towards your goals? And I think that in order to do that, you have to understand the whole idea of creativity, the whole idea of productivity. It's a carryover from, when we used to have farmers who could measure a day's crop yields and decide whether they were productive, or an assembly line during the Industrial Revolution. There's so many things that we could look at. But how do we measure productivity in this steep digital world? And I think if you're Tesla, maybe you could do that by more cars coming off the line, or is the level of happiness the customer has with the car, even if fewer cars make it off the line? Or is it based on what people are willing to pay, or their level of satisfaction, or is it based on social media sentiment, or is it based on a survey that's been issued to the customer? The point I'm trying to make is we are at a hard, fast place where we have to understand what value we're trying to provide and taking time to research and figure out what our contributions are and how our productivity is being measured can have a direct impact on how we do our jobs. So, busy work doesn't necessarily count as productivity, but engaging in upskilling or training activities could result in productivity. But is it making something better, or is it adding things to the list that we need to do and not progressing anything that we're currently doing? So it's one of those things where even some things that you think are good are going to wind up being counterproductive, which is really, really interesting. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Peter Drucker, but in 1995, defining productivity for the knowledge worker was just the beginning. Even an expert like him couldn't nail down a definition for pure quality. I can tell you now that there's no standardized definition of what productivity equals and how to make it balanced. And it's going to vary from situation to situation. And since it's so situational, you have to ask yourself, does this mean that it's going to add to your ability to have autonomy to do your job? Does it mean that your end customer is going to be happier? You almost have to create a definition yourself for what you feel like productivity really is. Um, so, a good way to think about this is imagine the end of a workday and you say to yourself, wow, I was productive. What does that mean? What exactly did you accomplish? Did your accomplishments align with your goals for your group, for your team, for your department? Did your productivity align with what you needed to do? Did you advance work on a longer term project and make things push forward? Did your values guide you through your work that day? Did you stick to your guns and do the things that you said you were going to do? Um, did you positively impact another person and their work and help them get something done? All of these are different ways that you can measure quote unquote productivity. I'm doing air quotes every time I say that word, but it's one of those things where we need to reflect and figure out, whether it's through introspection, retrospection, or surveys, how we are measuring productivity. What does productivity mean? And does productivity equal, the best thing for us to be measuring? So there we go again. The example I always love to use is in a manufacturing world. Think Toyota quality management systems. If they ripped off, 10,000 cars off the line a day, but only 1,000 function properly, people might reward them for being the most productive line because they're getting the most cars off the assembly line. But if it's very low quality or poor quality, they're going to quickly bite the bullet and realize, oh my goodness, it wasn't worth trying to speed things up. We have so many defects, right? So we need to understand that things have sped up so much and there's no signs of slowing down, but it doesn't mean that we have to do more to be productive. It means that we need to work smarter and not harder. So the question becomes, how do we leverage AI and other tools to help us figure out ways that we can, quote unquote, increase our productivity by doing things that are going to be easier to measure, by doing things that are going to move us closer to the end goal, and by doing things that are going to help uplift and move others. And I think that's the part that we miss. We don't necessarily look at what we do and how it impacts the greater good. So for me, I think that there are days where I'm like, man, I got 21 out of 30 things done on my to-do list. And yes, I have had days with 30 things on my to-do list, and I got 21 done. Man, I was productive. But then I go back and look at my email and I'm like, you know what? I really wasn't productive because there were so many other things that I needed to do or I could have been doing or things that would have added greater value that, yes, I got a lot of busy work done and that's great because I don't have to do it later. But the question becomes, did I do the good thing, the better thing, or the best thing? And my challenge for you is going to be to look at the work that you're doing each day. Take a quick sticky note and just write down the top 2 or 3 things that you need to get done. And if you do those top 2 or 3 things, great, then you can feel accomplished because you got the top things done. But on the flip side, there was a Navy admiral that recorded a commencement speech. And the one thing he told the cadets when they graduated was, if you don't do anything else every day when you wake up, you should make your bed. And people laughed at it like it was a joke. But what he was saying is, if you make your bed every day, at least you know when you go home that even if your whole day went to pot and you didn't get anything else done, that you come home to a freshly made bed. And I kind of take that to heart because I do believe that if we can redirect our attention, focus on the things that really matter, and drive towards a common goal, that we can get a whole lot of things done, and it's not just busy work. That's going to do it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at AgileDad.com. I'd love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.